Welcome to the second half of this morning's presentation here in Milpitas, California. We were talking about the difference between processed foods and nutritive foods, and we were talking about that the processed food emerged in the past century and is now an enormous global industry that controls a huge part of our life, our nutrition, and really it controls our attitudes and the way we look at the world. I want to talk more specifically about enzymes. Enzymes, as you know, are substances in the body, in your body, that bring about changes. An enzyme is a protein which exhibits the form follows function phenomenon of human physiology. In other words, the enzyme must be in an exact certain configuration in order to fit into its binding site, and only when it is in its binding site will it be able to have the action that it is supposed to accomplish. The processed food industry was the creation of different scientific methods of removing enzymes or denaturing enzymes from food. So it doesn't remove them so much as it denatures them. It inactivates the enzymes. This is accomplished in several ways. First of all, when you begin to heat a food above 118 degrees Fahrenheit, the enzyme begins to denature. That's why raw fruits and raw vegetables are actually healthier than steamed vegetables. Steamed fruits and vegetables are better than cooked vegetables because the more heat that is added, the more it is cooked, the more the enzymes are denatured. Drugs also serve to denature the natural food enzymes in food. So if you are on a lot of medication, you are inactivating the nutritious foods that you do take in. Alcohol is something else that denatures enzymes from food that you take in. Fluoride in the city water is something that denatures enzymes. Free radicals denature enzymes. Food processing, by definition, denatures enzymes. Canning. So in the 60-day program, there are no canned foods. Not only are enzymes denatured in the canning process, but one of the substances that they use in the lining of cans so the food doesn't stick to it is the neurotoxin phenol. So avoid canned foods during the 60-day program. And of course then, irradiation. Irradiation is a way of denaturing enzymes from food. Now remember I talked about form follows function. An enzyme is a long chain protein that has been wrapped and configured into a certain specific shape. It is held in this certain specific shape by means of hydrogen bonds. They're like little rubber bands that hold it in this shape. Now the enzyme has to retain that certain shape in order so it will fit into its binding site. So what denaturization is, when you heat it or when you do some of these other effects, it clips the hydrogen bonds. It clips those little rubber band attachments so that the enzyme will relax back to its original long chain protein shape. What is the effect? Now it is a foreign protein in your body. What is the effect of foreign protein in the body?
Immune response.
Exactly. Inflammation, the inflammatory response, the immune response. So by taking in denatured enzyme, this is why these foods are reactive and inflammatory. They used to have active nutritive whole food enzymes. Now they have denatured enzymes. Denatured enzymes are foreign proteins in the body triggering the autoimmune inflammatory response. Foods that cannot ripen. Okay, that's great. We have bananas here. I get to explain this. Now, These are fairly natural bananas. You see they're green at the end. They're picked a little bit green, and then as the enzymes in the food are still active, that is part of the natural ripening process. And if you leave this on the windowsill, after a few more days, the green will go away and become lighter, and there'll be more and more brown spots on this banana, right? And that is part of the natural ripening process. Whole Foods today, where bananas, for example, are really, really green. They're really, really green. And you'll take them home, and as they ripen, they will rot before they ripen. So if you wait, you're like, wow, when is it going to turn yellow so that I can eat it? Finally, you open it up and you'll see that it's still partly green, but now it's rotted inside. This is the effect of ethylene gas and radiation. The foods cannot ripen because the enzymes were denatured by either gas or irradiation, and they use that to transport foods a long way. So I see this sometimes even with organic foods, organic produce. In Bangkok, sometimes you'll go into a grocery store in Bangkok and you'll see Driscoll's blueberries from Salinas. You know, how did that happen? You know, ethylene gas and irradiation. and they're like $10 for a little tin that big too, right? Okay, but with bananas, you know, look for the brown spots. The brown spots, that's natural ripening, and that's an indication that less radiation and less gas has been used to interfere with the ripening process. So in general, but that's just always a good rule of thumb. That's always a good rule of thumb, to buy the produce as close as you can to local. Strawberries. Strawberries is another really obvious alteration of a natural food. You know, I just came back from Paris, and in all the little grocery stores in Paris, they have what strawberries used to look like. Strawberries are little. They're like this, remember? And they're really red, right? And when you cut them in half, it's really red all the way through, and they're juicy. Now, these giant strawberries, again, you go down to Pajaro, Salinas, all those wild places down there, Kentucky, and you know, you'll drive beside the side of the road, and there'll be like fruit stands, right? And you'll go, oh wow, I'll buy some fruits directly from the farmers. These guys are not the farmers, okay? These are the huge corporate 1,000-acre fields, you know, and it's the same hybridized GM, whatever, altered foods. I talked to some of these Mexican guys in one of the strawberry places one time, and I go, why are these strawberries so big? And they go, oh, those are the new strawberries, and that's what we have in America now. We have strawberries that are the size of apples, right? And when you take a knife and you cut those strawberries in half, what do you see? First of all, you may see yellow at the top of the strawberry, yellow at the bottom of the strawberry, and it hasn't quite ripened yet. So you put it on the windowsill so it can ripen and be all the way red. But then the problem is it might turn brown. It might start rotting before it ripens. They rot before they ripen, and then you cut the strawberry in half, and it's not red all the way through. It's white on the inside. It's white and pulpy. So that strawberry cannot ripen. It's going to rot before it ripens. This is the effect of hybridization, ethylene gas, and radiation. I mean, this is one reason why it's worthwhile to go to Europe, because you're going to see fruits that are like they used to be in America. Apples, when you buy apples, even, you know, just because you bought it at Whole Foods doesn't mean they have any particular food value. Just because it says organic doesn't mean it has any particular food value. My opinion is that most apples, even in Safeway, even in Whole Foods today, most apples are, when you bite into it, it's a white, pulpy substance reminiscent of apples. This has to do with lack of minerals in the topsoil. I mean, when you travel, when you go to someplace far away that hasn't been influenced by 30 years of Roundup and 30 years of NPK soil alteration, and you bite into that apple, and suddenly you know, you're a kid again, and you're like, I remember this from my grandmother's farm back when I was a kid. That's what an apple tastes like. We, you know, especially young people today in America, they have no idea what I'm talking about when I say that. But if you can remember, and this is the result of the decline of the quality of foods. Organic, yeah, we're on the right path. Doesn't necessarily mean that the produce has any value, but we have to do the best that we can. For those of you who live anywhere around here, what I've noticed is Sunday morning and Saturday morning down at the Great Mall, they have a really good farmers market. It only lasts for 4 hours. Out near Livermore, there's these Cambodians out there, and they grow some really good natural organic fruits and vegetables out there. But it's a problem. It's a huge problem. Okay, we all know what esophageal reflux is, or GERD, right? That's when you eat a food, you start eating and you already feel full. Or you lie down at night and you roll over and the food comes up. Okay, you feel full because you are full. Eating foods like this, or that quart of Haagen-Dazs you just ate that has no enzymes in it, you know, along with the 2 bags of Doritos, right? These foods are not recognized by human digestive enzymes. We have not evolved an enzyme that recognizes Hamburger Helper or Doritos barbecue chips. So as a consequence, these indigestible foods, they accumulate in our stomach, and your stomach is almost full when you eat the next bite of food, and then the cardiac sphincter down at the bottom of your esophagus, as you swallow, it opens up to deposit that new food that you just chewed up and swallowed, and then some of the stomach acids that are attempting to digest all that indigestible sludge that is sitting there in your stomach, some of that splashes up against the delicate mucosa of the cardiac sphincter, the distal esophagus, causing a pain that we call, colloquially, we call it heartburn, but it has nothing to do with your heart. That is reflux esophagitis. And then eventually, after years of this, the distal esophagus becomes scarred, and this leads to a syndrome known as, it's called GERD, but this is a guy's name. It begins with a B. Barrett's. Yeah, that's right, Barrett's syndrome. And then if you leave that go for another decade or so, esophageal cancer is one of the top 10 cancers, right? So esophageal cancer didn't happen overnight. It happened after years of eating foods that could not be digested in the stomach, and this is the whole sequence of events as it takes place. Now the good news with esophageal reflux is we're going to talk about the enzyme program. The enzymes, you take 3 capsules of enzymes 3 times a day for 60 days. That's it. And when you start doing that, you are adding back the enzymes that have been removed by food processing. The good news is that it doesn't take 60 days to resolve reflux. It usually only takes 2 weeks. And people, they've been doing Prilosec, they've been doing Tums and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, this is medical thinking. This is allopathic thinking, right? The stomach acids cause pain, so let's do away with the stomach acids, right? But the stomach acids were the only way that you're going to metabolize and break up that stuck debris that you've been shoving down your throat, for the last 2 years, right? And so, yeah, the pain will go away, but the problem remains. So that's their idea of curing people and solving a problem. I saw this T-shirt in Paris. The more I weigh, the harder I am to kidnap. Okay, who is that? Easy. Yeah, and what was his song? I mean, that guy was a true musician. He was a true musician, he had all of it, he could play the ukulele and sing, and it was better than most real, complete bands. That guy was a musician. Dr. Stan Bynum took the knowledge that he had learned from being the president of National Enzyme Company and then founded his own company in Phoenix back in the day, right? And he said that he wanted a full spectrum enzyme. What does that mean? To digest fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, as well as cellulase to digest extra fiber. But he was going to add to his enzyme a delivery system. Now, you probably remember from school that all enzymes require vitamin and mineral cofactors in order for the enzymes to actually have that activity, right, Dr. Terrence? And so he put the needed mineral and vitamin cofactors in his enzymes. I mean, that's the level of sophistication this guy was. And that's why I'm going to show you some of these Bioterrain analysis tests, these blood tests, and that's why we get the action that we get in 30 minutes. It's not a question. You don't have to believe that his enzymes work. You can observe it right before your eyes. Now, this is a typical, although abnormal, blood sample of a patient who has the usual free radical damage to most of the red cells, which we characterize by looking at the lumps and bumps appearance on the outside of the red blood cell. In addition, they have normal aggregation of the red blood cell. They're all clumped together. This geometrically diminishes oxygen delivery to the entire body because the red cells are designed to go through the capillaries, which is the smallest blood vessels of all, right? Single file in order for maximum oxygen delivery. So this is the way this person lives most of their life. This is what processed foods or foods with no enzymes do to the blood when this is part of their lifestyle year after year. This is the before example. Now here we see the same patient 30 minutes later. This is the after sample. And this is 30 minutes after taking the enzyme and the antioxidant. So we immediately see the changes, first of all, wrought by the enzyme in that, see how the red blood cells are now separate from each other. They are no longer aggregated and stuck together. This is how they should be because they are designed to go through the capillaries single file. So we have just geometrically increased oxygen delivery to this patient's body. These effects usually last about 4 or 5 hours in the blood. The second thing we see is the obvious difference between the before and after here, the changes from the antioxidant. Notice how in this sample, there is no longer this lumps and bumps appearance to the outer perimeter of all of the red cells like there was on the before. That's the result of neutralizing all free radicals in this patient's blood. Again, it lasts for about 4 or 5 hours. This is not an unusual patient. This type of dramatic change happens about 95% of the time for people who do this Bioterrain analysis, this live cell test before and after. And then the other concept that Bynum introduced to us was the concept of bioavailability. So he used to say, it doesn't matter what you eat, it doesn't matter what supplements you take, the only thing that matters is what is finally taken up at the cellular level. What is taken up at the cellular level? Most supplements do not even enter the bloodstream at all. They're not even digested or broken down. They go right through the system and are passed out. These enzymes were designed like alcohol and aspirin to be, if you have an empty stomach, they can be broken down and enter the bloodstream directly through the stomach. This is how they are effective in clearing out the debris in the blood. And then if you take these enzymes on a full stomach, they are then dragged through the entire digestive tract to clear out the tract. Yes, the concept of bioavailability. So he used that concept to evaluate supplements as well as nutrient foods. The concept of bioavailability. Whatever just goes through you and cannot be absorbed has no bioavailability. So the objective, the agenda of an enzyme program for 60 days is to clear the tract and to clear the blood. Right. So now, 80% of people, 80% of the American public has an 80% processed food diet. We are making Monsanto and all the biotech industry, we are making these billion dollar industries. 80% of people. So in the 60-day program, we are going to, this is the hardest thing, to eliminate processed foods from our diet just for 60 days. Just for 60 days. Now my contention is that everybody over the age of 40, even if you are in perfect health, you have tons of energy, and you never get sick, my opinion is that you should still do a detox at this point after 40 years because of the bioaccumulation of toxins in the air, the food, and the water. Now, if you are over 40 and you have some kind of chronic condition, you are tired, you have some kind of chronic arthritic condition, you have a digestive imbalance, you have weird headaches that don't respond to a ton of drugs, in these situations, you need to do a detox program in order to recalibrate your entire body, clear the tract and clear the blood. So this new religion of biotech, I can do a whole 4-hour section on this, but we don't have time to do that. But I just want to introduce the idea. The real expert in this area is Jeffrey Smith, of course, and he has 2 excellent books. If you don't read anything else, you can read my 30-page introduction to this area in a chapter on my website. It's called Introduction to GM Foods, and it's a summary not only of his work but of the other major works. But if you haven't studied this area a little bit, you have no idea what has gone on in the world since 1996. You have no idea. All this happened since 1996, and the first crop that was GM was what?
Corn.
No.
Oh, no, it was potatoes.
Soybeans. It was soybeans.
Potatoes.
No, it was soybeans. It started in 1996. There were no GM soybeans before 1996, and this was Monsanto. And in less than 5 years, they went from no soybeans genetically modified in the United States to 100% GM modified in 5 years, in 100%. Jeffrey Smith, in both of his books, he's going to tell you, actually there's only 4 of the 4 crops that are, the majority of them are genetically modified in the United States today, and they are corn, cotton, canola, and soybeans. So he'll talk about that. And so remember I talked about those the strawberries that are gigantic, looking like apples, and they're a huge bizarre shape. Those really aren't genetically modified. Those are hybrid. They pretend like it's global overpopulation, and we're doing this to increase the yield per acre, and this is this ostensible agenda, for the emergence of the biotech industry in the last 20 years. That's not it. That's not it at all. This is a for-profit adventure for one reason and one reason only: to increase the value to the shareholders of these global corporations. That's their only agenda. And he will show you how it's actually now crop yield per acre is actually decreasing. We've already hit the limits with GM crops. It's already going down. This whole thing about Roundup and soybeans and how the farmers have to sign the Monsanto contracts and buy the seeds from Monsanto every year, sign those contracts, and then in the South America, all the farmers are like killing themselves. The suicide rate, and it's a very dark story. But every time you eat this stuff, you're supporting that. The majority of soybeans produced in this country are not showing up in sushi restaurants as edamame, right? The vast majority of soybeans produced in this country are used to produce what?
Hog feed.
No.
Soybean oil.
Yes. hydrogenated soybean oil, which is the primary component of all the processed foods in the world, not just in the United States. This is a global business. You see this in Europe, you see this in Asia, you see this in Africa, you see it everywhere. Okay, so a substance that came from a food that is no longer a food that can infiltrate other trashy ingredients and be sold as food with very little nutrient value. Okay, there's a guy, do I have that? Oh yeah, this is this is Udo Erasmus. This is a technical book. He's a scientist, and he wrote this book a while ago, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. And now you're really gonna understand hydrogenation if you look at this. I summarized this book in my chapter called The Magic Bean on my website. Anyways, he talks about the 8-step process to convert soybeans to hydrogenated soybean oil. So I'm gonna go through this really fast. Cooking, pressing, solvent extraction, degumming, adding sodium hydroxide, which is the same thing as Drano. That's what Drano is, sodium hydroxide. Bleaching, deodorizing, and hydrogenation. The final step is hydrogenation. They take the final product and they force air through it through an aluminum catalyst for 6 hours. That's the final step of producing hydrogenated soybean oil, at which time that oil can be used to make paint or linoleum, very auto paint, very stable products, industrial degreasers, very stable products. This is the same exact soybean oil that they're using as the base for all these processed foods. So it's horrifying when you read fats that heal, fats that kill. Yeah, and so we talk about the exponential incidence of what disease of old people. Alzheimer's. Yeah, which is directly related to what metal. Aluminum. Yeah, so I mean that's another primary cause for that. Okay. Rolled gold pretzels. It was under a tree, right? And it was open, right? I didn't have any breakfast, I didn't have any lunch. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I was absolutely starving. So I walked over there and I go, damn, I'm really hungry. So I go, I wonder if these are still good. If it's open on the ground for a week. And so I picked up one of those pretzels and I bite it and it's like, wow, they're still good. So how is that? I mean, it tasted like perfect. But here's the main point. Now, a lot of people would say, ew, that's dirty. It's got bugs in it. No, that's not true. No self-respecting bug will go anywhere near that hydrogenated oil. So it's like inert. It has like a shelf life of like 200 years or something. So we should put it in a time capsule, send it out to space. Cheetos, this is, the American public in the 2000s. Okay, so that's a little experiment. And it's the same thing like we talk about breads. I always talk about this thing about bread. You go to Paris, you see the baguettes, and the baguettes are delicious in there. That's what Colette says in Ratatouille, the girl in the kitchen. She goes, this is how you see the good breads. It's by the sound. It crackles, and you can only do that in Paris. You can't go into the baguette, that stupid Paris baguette store. Now they have the strip malls, or in Safeway they have French bread and the baguettes. You go squish, squish, squish. That's oil. It's loaded with oil. They don't do that. They don't do that in Paris. So anyways, okay, so I'm talking about bread. So, you go into Safeway. You buy 100% whole wheat bread, organic, 100% organic whole wheat bread. Oh wow, this is going to be really healthy. And you take it home, and then accidentally you leave it out, and it gets stuck behind the toaster or something for 2 weeks. And then you go, damn, I forgot about this. And then you reach your hand in there, and it's still soft and nice and fresh. That's not fresh. That's hydrogenated soybean oil. That's what it does. It's the texture. So it's the illusion of freshness. The illusion of freshness. I mean, these guys came to play. These guys are sophisticated. They are masters of this.
What about California black bread? Still bad?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So it's California black bread, marble rye. There's this new one. It's called Our Daily Bread. Yeah, and of course the Ezekiel breads, yeah, are fine. Yeah, all those are fine. So, I mean, you're studying all this stuff, and it occurs to you, you know, you're starting to get this black helicopter tin hat idea, you know, Bilderberg and all this stuff, or I think about like Billy D's going, you know, the thing about conspiracies? The thing about conspiracies is, guess what? They're all true. So, you know, I don't know about whatever, but consider this chart. Consider this chart. There was a book that came out a few years ago. It wasn't a very good book, but it had a great chart in it. Here's the chart. Ready? The chart is from the time of Adam and Eve to the time of Wild Bill Hickok. You heard me do this before, right? Okay. That's how long it took to get 1 billion people on Earth. Okay, all that time, 1 billion people. Now to get the 2nd billion people only took 70 years. To get the 3rd billion, see how it's going up here? We just turned over 7 billion people on planet. Now a lot of you guys can remember 1974. In 74, there were only 4 billion people on Earth. And so it's like there are almost twice as many people on Earth today as there were in 1974. So here's my rhetorical question. Doesn't it follow then that human life has less value today than it did before? Maybe that's the message of Monsanto is telling us. That's all I'm going to say about the enzyme program. The enzymes is really the basis of the detox program. 3 enzyme capsules 3 times a day for 60 days. Either with food or without food. I mean, you can take them on an empty stomach or with food. On an empty stomach, it will go into the bloodstream and detox all that debris in your blood that we're going to see here. And on a full stomach, they'll be dragged through the digestive tract and add back the enzymes that have been removed by food processing.